know you were there. I'm doing a little reading. Yes, I am. I'm going to read 2 chapters in Mr. Popper's Penguins by Florence and Richard Atwater. I have been assigned, very excitingly by the way, to read chapter 3 and 4. Now you'll notice I have to wear real glasses for this because this font is small. Here we go. You ready? Okay. I'm going to calmly read you this. And thank you, by the way, for inviting me to read this. It's very exciting. Chapter 3. Tree. Yeah. Out of the Antarctic. What with the excitement of having the great Admiral Drake speak to him over the radio and his curiosity about the Admiral's message to him, Mr. Popper did not sleep very well that night. He did not see how he could possibly wait to find out what the Admiral meant. When morning came, he was almost sorry that he had nowhere to go, no houses to paint, no rooms to paper. It would have helped to pass the time. Would you like the living room papered over, he asked Mrs. Popper. I have quite a lot of paper number 88 left over from the mayor's house. I would not, said Mrs. Popper firmly. The paper on now is plenty good enough. I am going to the first meeting of the Ladies' Aid and Missionary Society today, and I don't want any mess around to clean up when I get home. That's how wives are. It's a true story. Very well, my love, said Mr. Popper meekly. And he settled down with his pipe, his globe, and his book of Antarctic adventures. But somehow, as he read today, he could not keep his mind on the printed words. His thoughts kept straying away to Admiral Drake. What could he have meant by a surprise for Mr. Popper? Fortunately for his peace of mind, he did not have so very long to wait. That afternoon, while Mrs. Popper was away at her meeting, said Janie and Bill had not come home yet from school, there was a loud ring at the front door. Ding dong! I suppose it's just the postman. I won't bother to answer it, he said to himself. The bell rang again. Ding dong! A little louder this time. Grumbling to himself, Mr. Popper went to the door. It was not the postman who stood there. It was an expressman with the largest box Mr. Popper had ever seen. Holy smokes. Party by the name of Popper live here. That's me, he said. Well, here's a package that's come Air Express all the way from Antarctica. Some journey, I'll say. Holy cow. Mr. Popper signed the receipt and examined the box. It was covered all over with markings. Unpack at once. Keep cool, said another. And he noticed the box was punched here and there with air holes. What could this be? Oh my gosh, are you guys excited? This is like kind of suspenseful. My bananas love this. You can imagine that once he had the box inside the house, Mr. Popper lost no time in getting the screwdriver, for by this time, of course, he had guessed it was a surprise from Admiral Drake. He's a smart guy, Mr. Popper. He had succeeded in removing the outer boards and part of the packing, which was a layer of dry ice, which if you touch it, it burns your fingers, you know. I'm just saying. When the depths of the package case, he suddenly heard a faint arc. That's the sound he heard. His heart stood still. Surely he had heard that sound before at the Drake Expedition movies. His hands were trembling so that he could scarcely lift off the last of the wrappings. Oh my gosh. Are you guys? Oh, this is crazy. Oh, I have to show you a picture in a minute. There was not the slightest doubt about it. It was a penguin. Check it out. A penguin. In the mail. This is insane. It's like me getting a rubber chicken, okay? I'm just saying. Mr. Popper was speechless with delight, but the penguin was not speechless. Ork, it said again, and this time it held out flippers and jumped over the packing debris. It was a stout little fellow, about 2.5 feet high. Although it was about the size of a small child, it looked much more like a little gentleman, with his smooth waistcoat in front and a long black tailcoat dragging a little behind. Its eyes were set in 2 white circles in its black head. It turned its head from one side to the other. At first, one eye, and then the other. It examined Mr. Popper like this. Right? Mr. Popper had read that penguins are extremely curious, and he soon found that this was true. For stepping out, the visitor began to inspect the house. Down the hall it went, into the bedrooms, with its strange, pompous little strut. You know how penguins walk? When it, or he, Mr. Popper had already begun to think of him as a he got to the bathroom. He looked around with a pleased expression on his face. Perhaps, thought Mr. Popper, all that white tiling reminds him of the ice and snow at the South Pole. Poor thing, maybe he's thirsty, which makes sense. It was a long journey, I'm sure. Carefully, Mr. Popper began to fill the bathtub with cold water. This was a little difficult because the inquisitive bird kept reaching over and trying to bite the faucets with its sharp red beak. Hysterical. Finally, however, he succeeded in getting the tub filled. Since the penguin kept looking over, Mr. Popper picked him up and dropped him in. The penguin was not minding this at all. Anyway, you're not shy, said Mr. Popper. I guess you've got sort of used to playing around in those explorers at the pole, with those explorers at the pole. When he thought the penguin had had enough of a bath, he drew out the stopper. He was just wondering what to do next when Janie and Bill burst in from school. Hey, Papa, they shouted together in the bathroom door. What is it? It's a South Pole penguin sent to me by Admiral Drake. Look, said Bill, it's marching. The delighted penguin was indeed marching with his pleased little nods of handsome black head. He was parading up and down the inside of the bathtub. Sometimes he seemed to be counting the steps it took. 6 steps for the length, 2 steps for the width, 6 steps for the length again, and 2 more for the width. 6 plus 6 is 12, plus 2 is 14, plus 2. 16 steps total. Sometimes I do math. For such a big bird, he takes awfully small steps, said Bill. And look how his little black coat drags behind. It almost looks as if it were too big for him, said Janie. But the penguin was tired of marching. This time, when it got to the end of the tub, it decided to jump up the slippery curve. Oh no. And then it turned, and with outstretched flippers, he tobogganed down on its white stomach. They could see that those flippers, which were black on the outside, like the sleeves of a tailcoat, were white underneath. Gook, gook, said the penguin, trying its new game again and again. What's his name, Papa? Asked Janie. Gook, gook, said the penguin, sliding down once more on his glossy white stomach. It sounds something like Cook, said Mr. Popper. Why, that's it, of course. We'll call him Cook. Captain Cook. Okay, that's chapter 3. So you can have a swig or a snack. I'll have a swig of my Dunkin'. Cheers. Ready for chapter 4? All right, get comfortable. Chapter 4. This is called Captain Cook, which reminds me of Captain Hook, who's a pirate guy, who I call Captain Hooky Poo. I'm just thinking out loud. Okay, here we go. Captain who? Call who? Captain Cook asked Mrs. Popper. She came into the door so quietly, no one knew she was there. Why, the penguin, said Mr. Popper. I was just saying, he went on as Mrs. Popper sat down suddenly on the floor to recover her surprise, that we'd name him after Captain Cook. He was a famous English explorer who lived about the time of the American Revolution. He sailed all over where no one had ever sailed before. He didn't actually get to the South Pole, of course, but he made a lot of important scientific discoveries about the Antarctic regions. He was a brave man and a kind leader, so I think Captain Cook is a very suitable name for our penguin here. "When I never," said Mrs. Popper. "Gork," said Captain Cook, suddenly getting lively again. With a flap of his flippers, he jumped from the tub to the washstand, and he stood there for a minute, surveying the floor. Then he jumped down, walked over to Mrs. Popper, and began to peck at her ankle. "Oh, no. What are you, crazy, Penguin?" "Oh, stop him, Papa," screamed Mrs. Popper, retreating into the hallway with Captain Cook after her, and Mr. Popper and the children following. In the living room, she paused. So did Captain Cook, for he was delighted with the room. Now, a penguin may look very strange in a living room, but a living room looks very strange to a penguin. Even Mrs. Popper had to smile as they watched Captain Cook, with the light of curiosity in his excited circular eyes and his black tailcoat dragging pompously behind his little pinkish feet. Pinkish, my favorite color. Strut from one upholstered chair to another, pecking at each to see what it was made of. Then he turned suddenly and marched out into the kitchen. "Oh boy, here we go. Maybe he's hungry," said Janie. Captain Cook immediately marched up to the refrigerator. "Gork," he inquired, turned to slant his head wisely at Mrs. Popper, looking at her pleadingly with his right eye. "He certainly is cute," she said. "I guess I'll have to forgive him for biting my ankle. He probably only did it out of curiosity. Anyway, he's a nice, clean-looking bird." She likes clean birds. She would like chicken. "Ork," repeated the penguin, nibbling at the metal handle of the refrigerator door with his upstretched beak. How did he know it was a refrigerator? And there was food in there. This is a smart penguin. Mr. Popper opened the door for him, and Captain Cook stood very high. He leaned his sleek back head back so he could look and see everything inside. Now, Mr. Popper's work was over for the winter. The icebox was not quite so full as usual, but the penguin did not know that. "What do you suppose he likes to eat?" said Mrs. Popper. "Well, let's see," said Mr. Popper, as he removed all the food and set it on the kitchen table. "Now then, Captain Cook, take a look." The penguin jumped up onto a chair, and from there onto the edge of the table, flapping his flippers again to recover his balance. Then he walked solemnly around the table and between the dishes of food, inspecting everything with the greatest interest, though he touched nothing. Finally, he stood still, very erect, raised his beak to the point of the ceiling, and he made a loud, almost purring noise. "Oh!" Here he is. That's him looking at the dinner table. Can you see it? He's walking on the dinner table, which I was never allowed to do. Penguins have freedom. "That is a penguin's way of saying how pleased it is," said Mr. Popper, who had read about it in his Antarctic books. Apparently, however, what Captain Cook wanted to show was that he was pleased with their kindness rather than with their food, for now, to their surprise, he jumped down and he walked into the dining room. "I know," said Mr. Popper. "We ought to have some seafood for him, canned shrimps or something, or maybe he isn't hungry yet. I've read that penguins can go for a month without food." A month without food? Are you kidding me right now? Do you hear that? You guys don't do that. Holy cow. "Mama, Papa," called Bill. "Come see what Captain Cook has done." I'm just guessing here. Captain Cook has done it all right. He had discovered the bowl of goldfish on the dining room window sill. By the time Mrs. Popper reached over to lift him away, he had already swallowed the last of the goldfish. Oh, let's have a moment of silence. That's terrifying. "Bad, bad penguin," reproved Mrs. Popper, glaring down at Captain Cook. Captain Cook squatted guiltily on the carpet and tried to make himself look small. "He knows he's done wrong," said Mr. Popper. "Isn't he smart?" "Maybe he's smart, but you got no goldfish anymore. You just swallowed them." "Ugh. Maybe we can train him," said Mrs. Popper. "Bad, naughty Captain," she said to the penguin in a loud voice. "Bad to eat goldfish." And she spanked him on his round black head. Before she could do that again, Captain Cook hastily waddled out to the kitchen. There, the Poppers found him trying to hide in the still open refrigerator. He was squatting under the ice cube coils, under which he could barely squeeze sitting down. His round, white circle eyes looked out at them mysteriously from the dimness of the inside of the box. See his eyes? I think that's about the right temperature for him. At that, we could let him sleep there at night. But where will I put the food? Said Mrs. Popper. Oh, I guess I can get another icebox for the food, said Mr. Popper. Look, said Janie. He's gone to sleep. Mr. Popper turned the cold switch to its coldest so that Captain Cook could sleep more comfortably. Then he left the door ajar so that the penguin would have plenty of fresh air to breathe. That was nice of him. Tomorrow, I will have the icebox service department send a man out to bore some holes in the door for air. Oh my gosh. And then he can put a handle on the inside of the door so Captain Cook can go in and out as he pleases. Well, dear me, I never thought we would have a penguin for a pet, said Mrs. Popper. Still, he behaves pretty well on the whole, other than eating the family goldfish. And he is so nice and clean that perhaps he will be a good example to you and the children. And now I declare we must get busy. We haven't done anything but watch that bird. Papa, will you just help me set the beans on the table, please? Just a minute, answered Mr. Popper. I just happen to think that Captain Cook will not feel right on the floor of that icebox. Penguins make their nests of pebbles and stones, so I will take some ice cubes out of the tray and put them underneath him. That way, he will be more comfortable. And that is the end of chapter 4. I kind of like this book. Do you guys like it? Monkey likes everything. He's pretty easy to read too. Banana Man? Oh, I wish I was a penguin, hurrah, hurrah. I wish I was a penguin and I would not eat your goldfish. That was a quick song. Okay, people. Have a good rest of your book. Whoever's reading next, take it away.